You want to know what betrayal feels like? It's not the knife in your back. It's watching someone you trusted hand that knife to someone else and smile while they twist it. No matter how qualified you are, he whispered, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder, I'll do everything in my power to bring you down, for my girl. Those words didn't come from an enemy. They didn't come from a rival or some jealous peer trying to climb the ranks. No. They came from Admiral Marcus Grant, my commanding officer, my mentor, the man I had trusted with my career, my future, my goddamn life for 6 years. 6 years of believing he saw something in me worth nurturing. 6 years of thinking loyalty meant something in this uniform. And right there, in front of my entire unit, men and women I had bled alongside, trained alongside, risked my life alongside, he handed her my badge. My badge. The one I had earned through sweat, through sleepless nights, through proving myself over and over again in a world that constantly questioned whether a woman belonged there at all. Step aside, Valdez, he said, not even looking at me. Looking at her. His precious Lara, standing there with that smug little smile, reaching for the symbol of everything I had worked for. I didn't flinch. You know why? Because the Navy doesn't teach you to flinch. It teaches you to stand at attention while your world crumbles around you. It teaches you to salute while your heart is being ripped out of your chest. So I did what every fiber of military discipline demanded. I saluted. I swallowed the pain that was choking me, and I turned away. But here's what that arrogant son of a bitch didn't know. What he couldn't have known because he was too busy playing house with his little girlfriend to pay attention to the real chain of command. Headquarters had already signed a promotion letter. A letter sitting in my quarters unopened because I thought it was just another reassignment. Another way to shuffle me quietly out of his sight. That letter named me his new superior. 2 weeks later, when I stepped out of that HQ convoy in full command uniform, when the entire base lined up expecting his inspection and saw me instead, his smile cracked for the first time. And let me tell you something. Watching a man's arrogance shatter in real time? That's a sound you never forget. He replaced me with his girlfriend. But headquarters had already replaced him with me. Before I tell you what happened next, let me paint you a picture of what followed that moment. The silence. God, the silence was deafening. The unit, my unit, the people I had served beside, they pretended not to see. Can you imagine that? These warriors, these people trained to face enemy fire without blinking, suddenly developed selective blindness when it came to watching their commander destroy one of their own. They studied their boots. They found fascinating things to look at in the sky, anywhere but at the woman being publicly humiliated. And his girlfriend? Lara? She didn't just take my badge, she savored it. I watched her smirk as I removed my rank pin, watched her straighten her shoulders like she was accepting some grand honor instead of the spoils of political corruption. She looked at me like I was nothing. Like 6 years of service, of proving myself, of earning respect through competence and dedication meant absolutely nothing compared to who she was sleeping with. That day, silence was survival. The Navy taught me that. When you're underwater and your equipment fails, you don't panic, you don't scream, you conserve your oxygen and you find a way to surface. That parade ground became my ocean floor, and I was drowning in the humiliation, but I held my breath. I held my goddamn breath because I knew something they didn't. The sunlight was harsh that day, making our medals gleam like false promises. The very decorations that were supposed to represent honor, sacrifice, service. They felt like jokes pinned to my chest. I stood there in that perfect military formation, watching the systematic destruction of everything I believed in, and I realized something that would change me forever. Sometimes the real enemy wears the same uniform you do. You want to understand how deep this betrayal cut? Let me take you back to the beginning. Let me tell you about Aria Valdez, the helicopter mechanic who believed the military was a meritocracy. I started from the bottom. Not the bottom like some officer's kid who had to work their way up from lieutenant, the real bottom. I was turning wrenches, crawling through engine compartments, coming home every night with grease under my fingernails and oil stains on my coveralls. I was the daughter of a mechanic, and I knew machines better than most people know their own families. But I was good at it. More than good, I was precise, disciplined, humble. I understood that every bolt I tightened, every system I serviced, every repair I made could mean the difference between life and death for the crews who trusted their lives to those aircraft. That responsibility, that weight, it shaped me. It taught me that excellence wasn't negotiable. Admiral Marcus Grant first noticed me during a storm rescue mission. Category 3 hurricane, waves 30 feet high, winds that could tear a helicopter apart if you looked at them wrong. We had birds going down, crews in the water, and every mechanic on the base working around the clock to keep our rescue assets flying. I had been awake for 36 hours straight when they brought in a Seahawk with catastrophic engine failure. The senior mechanics took one look at it and started talking about parts orders, about how it would be down for weeks. But I saw something they missed. A cascade failure that looked worse than it was if you knew where to look. I spent 14 hours in that engine compartment, barely stopping to eat, my hands raw from the work, my back screaming from being bent over those components. But when I fired up that engine and it purred like a contented cat, when we got that bird back in the air and it pulled 3 sailors out of those hellish waters, that was the moment Admiral Grant really saw me. "You've got command instincts, Valdez," he said, finding me afterward, still covered in hydraulic fluid and exhaustion. "You see the big picture while you're handling the details. That's rare." For 6 years after that, he was more than my commanding officer. He was my mentor, my champion, the closest thing to military family I had. He guided my career, pushed me toward officer training, wrote recommendations that opened doors I never thought I could walk through. When I doubted myself, when the weight of being one of the few women in command positions felt overwhelming, he reminded me that I belonged there. "Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, Valdez," he told me once. "It's about being the clearest one. You've got that clarity." I trusted him. God help me, I trusted him completely. But power corrupts, doesn't it? Even good men, especially good men, because they think their intentions justify their actions. It started when Admiral Grant began his relationship with Laura Morrison, a civilian contractor assigned to our logistics division. Beautiful, charming, connected. Everything that looked good on an admiral's arm at official functions. At first, I was happy for him. The man had been divorced for years, threw himself into his work like it was the only thing that mattered. He deserved happiness. What I didn't see, what I was too naive, too trusting to recognize, was how that relationship would poison everything we had built together. Gradually, assignments that had been mine for years started shifting to Laura. "She's got fresh eyes on the logistics chain," he'd explain. "Civilian perspective might help streamline operations." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like good leadership, utilizing all available resources. But then it became more than assignments. It became access. Laura started sitting in on briefings where she had no business being. She'd offer opinions on matters completely outside her expertise, and Grant would nod thoughtfully like she was revealing some profound military insight instead of repeating talking points from contractor manuals. The praise that used to come my way started flowing to her instead. In front of the staff, in official reports, even in casual conversation. Suddenly everything was about what Laura had accomplished, what Laura had suggested, how Laura's innovative thinking was revolutionizing our operations. And me? I got the corrections. The quiet criticisms. The subtle undermining that's impossible to prove but impossible to ignore. "Valdez, your approach on the supply audit was thorough, but perhaps overly rigid. Laura's civilian background gives her more flexibility in these matters. The maintenance schedules you proposed show military precision, but they lack the efficiency insights that come from private sector experience. Your leadership style is very traditional, very by the book. Sometimes we need to think outside military doctrine." Every conversation became a comparison where I somehow came up short. Every decision I made was subjected to scrutiny while hers were accepted without question. The bass started to whisper. Quietly, carefully, but loudly enough for me to hear. She's being phased out. The Admiral's got his new golden girl. Valdez is on her way out, mark my words. I felt it happening, this slow erosion of my position, my credibility, my future. But what could I do? File a complaint? Against whom? For what? Favoritism isn't technically illegal, and Grant was careful never to cross any lines that would leave him vulnerable to official action. He was destroying my career with 1,000 small cuts, each one defensible on its own, but collectively devastating. I started questioning myself. Maybe I was too rigid. Maybe my experience was making me resistant to new ideas. Maybe I was seeing threats where none existed because I couldn't handle sharing influence with another woman. That's what betrayal really does to you. It makes you complicit in your own destruction. The setup came during a routine inspection. These were supposed to be administrative formalities, chances for command to review operations and address any concerns. I had conducted dozens of them over the years, had them down to a science of efficiency and thoroughness. But this one was different. This one was theater. Admiral Grant assembled the entire unit in formation, full dress uniforms, everything polished and perfect. Standard procedure, nothing unusual there. What was unusual was Lara standing beside him in her civilian clothes, holding a folder like she had some official role to play. He went through the usual inspection routine, reviewing personnel files, checking equipment logs, asking the kinds of questions that demonstrated command oversight. Everything normal, everything professional. Until he got to my section. Staff, I want to address some organizational changes that will improve our operational efficiency, he announced, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that made subordinates straighten unconsciously. My stomach dropped. I knew. Somehow, I knew what was coming before he said the words. Effective immediately, logistics coordination for this unit will be handled through our civilian contractor liaison. This will streamline communication between military operations and civilian support services. He turned to me, and for just a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not malice, exactly, but something worse, pity. Like he was doing me a favor by putting me out of my misery. Valdez, remove your coordination badge. The words hit like physical blows. Not a request, not a discussion, an order. In front of everyone I had served with, everyone who had looked to me for leadership, everyone who had trusted me to have their backs in the field. I felt my hands moving without conscious thought, unpinning the badge that represented years of earned authority. My fingers were steady, muscle memory from thousands of uniform inspections, but inside I was screaming. He took that badge from my hands and turned to Lara, holding it out to her like he was presenting some precious gift. From now on, she'll coordinate your unit operations. You can report through her for all logistics matters. She took it. She actually took it, pinning MY badge to her civilian jacket like she had earned the right to wear it. The smirk on her face, God, that smirk will haunt me forever. It wasn't just satisfaction, it was triumph. She had won some game I didn't even know we were playing. I held my posture. Military bearing, shoulders back, eyes forward. But inside, I was falling apart. That wasn't leadership. That was ego dressed in uniform. That was a man so corrupted by personal desire that he would sacrifice the trust and respect of his entire command to please his girlfriend. That was the moment I realized that the institution I had served faithfully, the code of honor I had lived by, the meritocracy I had believed in, none of it mattered when personal politics entered the equation. That night, alone in my quarters, I found the letter. It was sitting on my desk when I walked in, a sealed envelope bearing the official insignia of Fleet Headquarters. I had assumed it was another reassignment, another step in what I thought was my systematic removal from any position of influence. Maybe Alaska. Maybe some desk job in the middle of nowhere where I could finish out my service in obscurity. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Not that night. The humiliation was too fresh, the pain too raw. I sat there staring at that envelope, wondering if this was how careers died, not with dramatic court-martials or public scandals, but with quiet shuffling and bureaucratic elimination. For 2 weeks, that letter sat unopened while I went through the motions of my remaining duties. 2 weeks of watching Lara fumble through responsibilities she didn't understand, of seeing confused looks from staff who couldn't figure out why a civilian was suddenly making decisions about military operations, of pretending everything was normal while my world collapsed around me. I had convinced myself that opening that letter would make the nightmare official. As long as it remained sealed, I could maintain some small hope that maybe, somehow, this wasn't the end of everything I had worked for. Then the HQ representative arrived. I was in the motor pool, trying to lose myself in the familiar comfort of mechanical work, when Sergeant Martinez found me. "Ma'am, there's someone here from Fleet Headquarters. Says he needs to speak with you immediately." Official business. My blood turned to ice. This was it. The final shoe dropping. The official notification of my transfer to some career-ending assignment where I could quietly fade away. I cleaned the grease off my hands, straightened my uniform, and walked to the administration building like I was walking to my own execution. The representative was waiting in the conference room, a crisp lieutenant commander with a briefcase and the kind of expression that revealed nothing. "Commander Valdez," he said, standing as I entered. "Why haven't you responded to your promotion orders?" I stared at him. "I'm sorry, what?" He opened his briefcase and pulled out an official document, sliding it across the table to me. "Your appointment to Regional Command Lead, effective 2 weeks ago. We've been waiting for your acknowledgement." I looked down at the document, the words swimming in front of my eyes as my brain tried to process what I was seeing. Commander Aria Valdez. By order of the Fleet Board, you are hereby appointed Regional Command Lead, effective immediately. Regional Command Lead. Not a transfer. Not a demotion. Not the career-ending exile I had expected. A promotion. The biggest promotion of my career. My hands were shaking as I looked up at the representative. This is real? "Ma'am, Fleet Headquarters doesn't issue joke appointments. You've been selected to command this entire region based on your performance evaluations, your leadership record, and recommendations from multiple senior officers. The appointment was signed 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Before the inspection. Before the badge ceremony. Before Grant's public humiliation. While he was busy playing power games with his girlfriend, Fleet Headquarters was recognizing the real chain of command. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it arrives in an envelope that sits unopened on your desk while you're too broken to believe in miracles. The day of reckoning came exactly 2 weeks later. I was in my quarters, finally wearing the uniform that matched my new rank, when I heard the commotion outside. Vehicles approaching, multiple engines, the kind of convoy that meant important visitors. Through my window, I could see the base personnel forming up in inspection formation, everyone assuming Admiral Grant was expecting some high-level visit. The irony was perfect. He had trained them so well to respond to authority that they automatically assembled to honor the very system that was about to replace him. I walked out of my quarters and toward the parade ground, my new insignia catching the sunlight. I could see Grant at the front of the formation, chest out, preparing to receive whatever dignitary he thought was coming to visit his command. The HQ motorcade pulled through the main gate with appropriate ceremony. Black vehicles with military escorts, flags flying, everything designed to communicate that this was official fleet business. The entire staff was lined up in perfect formation, every uniform pressed, every piece of equipment polished, every face turned toward the convoy with appropriate military bearing. Grant stood at attention, ready to salute whatever admiral or general was about to emerge and grace his base with their presence. I could see him from across the parade ground, his posture perfect, his confidence absolute. He had no idea that his world was about to change forever. The convoy stopped. Doors opened. And I stepped out. The silence that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just quiet, it was the complete absence of sound that comes when reality shifts so fundamentally that everyone's brain needs a moment to recalibrate. The HQ representative who had visited me earlier stepped out behind me and called the formation to attention. Staff, present arms for Regional Command Lead Valdez. Every hand snapped to salute position. Every eye focused on me as I walked across that parade ground, my new rank clearly visible, my authority now absolute and unquestionable. I could see Grant's face as understanding dawned. The confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror as he realized what was happening. His jaw went slack, his perfect military posture crumbled slightly, and for the first time since I had known him, Admiral Marcus Grant looked genuinely afraid. The representative stepped forward with the official documents. Regional Command Lead, ma'am, your staff is assembled for inspection. I took my position behind the command desk that had been set up for the ceremony. The same desk where Grant had signed my humiliation 2 weeks earlier. The same spot where he had handed my badge to his girlfriend and told me to step aside. Now I sat behind it, and he stood in formation with everyone else. No mistake, Admiral, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent parade ground. You're reporting to me now. The air itself seemed to shift. Officers glanced at each other with barely concealed shock. NCOs struggled to maintain their military bearing while processing the complete reversal of their command structure. And Grant just stood there, his face cycling through emotions I had never seen from him before. He gave my badge to his girlfriend. Headquarters gave me the entire command. An hour later, he was standing in my office. Not the office I had occupied as his subordinate, but the command office that had been his until that morning. The chair I sat in was still warm from his presence, the desk still arranged according to his preferences, the walls still bearing his certificates and commendations. But the nameplate now read Regional Command Lead A, Valdez, and that made all the difference. He entered without his usual confidence, his shoulders slightly hunched, his voice shaking in a way I had never heard before. Aria, I need to understand what happened here. This promotion, it came out of nowhere. I looked at him across the desk that was now mine, this man who had been my mentor, my champion, my betrayer. Part of me wanted to savage him, to make him feel every bit of the humiliation and pain he had put me through. Part of me wanted to watch him beg. Instead, I slid the promotion orders across the desk to him. Read them, Admiral. Every word. Pay special attention to the date they were signed. He picked up the documents with hands that weren't quite steady, his eyes scanning the official language that detailed my new authority. I watched his face as he reached the signature line, as he saw the date that preceded his public betrayal by 3 weeks. This was signed. He began, his voice trailing off as the implications sank in. Before you handed my badge to your girlfriend? Yes. Before you told me to step aside? Yes. Before you decided that personal loyalty was more important than professional competence? Yes. I stood up, moving around the desk to face him directly. While you were playing house and politics, Fleet Headquarters was evaluating actual performance. While you were undermining my authority to please your girlfriend, they were recognizing my leadership. While you were thinking with your heart instead of your head, they were thinking with their heads instead of their hearts. He sank into the chair across from my desk, suddenly looking older than his years. Aria, I was trying to protect her career. She needed opportunities, needed to prove herself. And who was protecting mine, sir? The question hung in the air between us like an accusation that couldn't be answered because we both knew the truth. He had been so concerned with advancing his girlfriend's career that he had forgotten about the woman who had served under him faithfully for 6 years. He had been so focused on what he wanted that he had lost sight of what was right. I walked back to my chair and sat down, studying the man who had shaped so much of my military career. The disappointment was almost overwhelming, not just in what he had done, but in what he had become. Leadership isn't ownership, Admiral. You forgot that. You started treating your command like a personal kingdom where you could reward friends and punish anyone who threatened your girlfriend's advancement. You forgot that these people trust us to make decisions based on confidence, not pillow talk. He looked up at me, and I could see the exact moment when the full weight of his arrogance hit him. The realization that he had sacrificed his integrity, his command, and his legacy for a relationship that had blinded him to everything else. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I could have destroyed him. With my new authority, I could have launched investigations into his favoritism, could have made sure his career ended in disgrace and scandal. I could have made him pay for every humiliation, every slight, every moment of doubt he had caused me. Instead, I chose grace. You'll remain on advisory duty until your transfer papers are processed. I expect complete professionalism during the transition. You'll cooperate fully with your replacement and ensure that this command continues to operate at the highest standards. He nodded, looking like a man who had aged years in the span of an hour. That's it? No investigation? No disciplinary action? I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. Admiral, you've already faced the only judge that matters. You've already received the only sentence that counts. You have to live with the knowledge that you threw away everything you built for a relationship that cost you your honor. Power isn't revenge. It's restraint. Real authority doesn't need to crush its enemies. It simply moves forward while they destroy themselves. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in the difference between leadership and management. Grant remained on base during the transition, a ghost of his former authority, watching as I systematically restored order to a command structure he had corrupted with personal politics. The first thing I did was call Lara into my office. She arrived with the same smug confidence she had displayed when she took my badge, clearly expecting that her relationship with Grant would somehow protect her from the consequences of the command change. She sat across from my desk wearing my coordination badge like a trophy, her expression suggesting she thought this was all some temporary inconvenience. "Ms. Morrison," I began, keeping my voice professionally neutral, "I'm reviewing all personnel assignments and contractor positions. I need to understand exactly what qualifications led to your current role." She shifted slightly in her chair, her confidence flickering. Admiral Grant felt that my private sector experience brought valuable perspectives to military logistics. I see. And what specific private sector experience qualified you to coordinate military unit operations? The question hung in the air while she struggled to find an answer that didn't involve her relationship with my predecessor. I watched her realize that without Grant's protection, her position was built on nothing but favoritism and proximity to power. I have a degree in business administration. I understand supply chain management. Supply chain management for civilian contractors, yes. That's actually outside your current assignment scope. Your contractor agreement specifies logistics liaison duties, not unit coordination. The badge you're wearing represents authority you were never technically authorized to hold. I held out my hand. I'll need that back. She unpinned the badge with hands that shook slightly, the weight of her false authority finally becoming clear to her. As she placed it in my palm, I could see her calculating whether Grant would intervene on her behalf, whether their relationship still carried enough influence to protect her. Your contractor position will continue within its original parameters, I continued. Supply liaison, administrative support, civilian-military interface. No unit authority, no operational decision-making, no access to classified briefings. Is that understood? She nodded, her earlier arrogance completely deflated. Will Admiral Grant be? I mean, is he still? Admiral Grant is being transferred to a staff position at headquarters. His replacement will be here next month. I suggest you focus on performing your actual job duties rather than expecting personal relationships to substitute for professional competence. After she left, I sat alone in my office, holding the badge that had started this entire nightmare. Such a small thing to cause so much damage. Such a simple symbol to represent the corruption of everything I had believed in. But symbols matter. Especially in the military, where respect for authority and chain of command are the foundation of everything we do. When those symbols are corrupted, when they're handed out based on personal relationships rather than earned through service, the entire system begins to rot from within. I pinned the badge back onto my uniform, where it belonged. Grant's final weeks on base were painful to watch. This man who had commanded with such confidence, who had shaped the careers of dozens of officers, who had been respected throughout the fleet, he moved through his remaining duties like a shadow of himself. I found him one evening in his former office, packing the personal effects that had accumulated over years of command. Photos of ceremonies, commendations, mementos from deployments and achievements, the physical evidence of a career that had been distinguished until he let personal desire override professional judgment. "The new regional commander arrives next week," I said from the doorway. "Your replacement at headquarters is expecting your transition report by Friday." He looked up from the box he was packing, his face drawn with exhaustion and something deeper, a kind of spiritual defeat that comes from realizing you've betrayed everything you once stood for. "Aria, I need you to know, what I did to you, it wasn't malicious. I wasn't trying to hurt you." I stepped into the office, closing the door behind me. This conversation needed to happen in private, away from the curious eyes of staff who were still processing the dramatic change in their command structure. "I know that, Admiral. That's what makes it worse." He frowned, not understanding. "If you had been malicious, if you had been deliberately trying to destroy my career out of spite or jealousy, at least that would have been personal. I could have fought that. I could have defended myself against that." I moved to the window, looking out at the base that was now my responsibility. "But you weren't malicious. You were just blind. You were so focused on what you wanted, so convinced that your feelings justified your actions, that you couldn't see the damage you were doing to everyone around you." I turned back to face him. "You didn't set out to betray me, Admiral. You just forgot that I mattered. You forgot that 6 years of faithful service earned me more consideration than being discarded for your girlfriend's advancement. You forgot that leadership means making decisions based on what's right, not what's convenient." He sat down heavily in his chair, looking older than I had ever seen him. I told myself I was helping her. I told myself that bringing civilian perspectives into military operations would benefit everyone. I told myself that your experience and competence meant you'd land on your feet no matter what. You told yourself a lot of things to avoid admitting that you were playing favorites. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of broken trust and lost respect. Finally, he spoke again. Do you think I can come back from this? Rebuild what I've lost?" I considered the question seriously. This man had been my mentor, had shaped my understanding of leadership and service. Despite everything that had happened, I didn't want to see him destroyed. "Admiral, the fleet is full of officers who made mistakes and learned from them. But you can't come back from something you don't fully understand. Until you accept that what you did was fundamentally wrong, not just tactically unwise, but morally corrupt, you'll be vulnerable to making the same mistakes again." I moved toward the door, then paused. "You taught me that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the clearest one. For the past few months, your voice became muddy with personal desire. If you want to lead again, you need to find that clarity." 2 days before his departure, Grant left something on my desk. It was a handwritten note, written on his personal stationery, sealed in an envelope with my name written in his careful script. I found it when I arrived for the morning briefing, propped against my coffee cup like a final message from a ghost. I opened it carefully, not sure what to expect. Recriminations? Justifications? A final attempt to explain away his actions? Instead, I found something I hadn't expected: accountability. "Commander Valdez," it began, using my new title with what felt like genuine respect. I have spent the past weeks trying to understand how I became someone I no longer recognize. The answer is simple, though painful. I mistook power for control, authority for ownership, and personal desire for professional judgment. You were right about everything. I forgot that leadership is service, not privilege. I forgot that the people under my command deserve decisions based on competence, not favoritism. I forgot that 6 years of faithful service from you earned more consideration than a few months of romance with someone else. Most importantly, I forgot that the moment I put my personal relationships ahead of professional integrity, I stopped being worthy of the trust placed in me by everyone who wears this uniform. You proved something in these past weeks that I failed to demonstrate in my final months of command. Real power is restraint. Real authority is justice, and real leadership is putting the needs of others ahead of your own desires. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that watching you handle this situation with such grace and professionalism has reminded me of the leader I used to be and the leader I hope to become again. Thank you for showing me what honor looks like when it's tested. Thank you for choosing justice over revenge. And thank you for proving that the best leaders are forged not in comfort, but in the crucible of betrayal and disappointment. Your service to this command and to the fleet exemplifies everything this uniform is supposed to represent. With deepest respect and regret, Admiral Marcus Grant. I read the letter 3 times, my emotions cycling between vindication, sadness, and something approaching forgiveness. This was the man I had once respected, the leader who had shaped my early career, finally acknowledging the depth of his failure. I walked to the corner of my office where I kept my personal photos. Images of my family, my graduation from officer training, significant moments from my career. Among them was a photo of my father in his Navy uniform, taken when he was about my current age, his face showing the same mixture of pride and responsibility that I saw in my own mirror these days. I pinned Grant's letter next to that photo. 2 men, one failed me, one raised me. Both taught me how to lead. 1 year later, I found myself standing at a podium addressing a new class of officer candidates. These young men and women represented the future of military leadership, and I had been asked to speak to them about the realities of command, the challenges they would face, and the principles that would guide them through the difficult decisions ahead. Looking out at their eager faces, I saw myself from years earlier. Convinced that competence and dedication would be enough, that the system would always recognize merit, that honor and politics existed in separate worlds. They would learn, as I had learned, that the real test of leadership comes not when everything goes according to plan, but when the people you trust most prove unworthy of that trust. They tried to replace me with loyalty, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. Personal loyalty, romantic loyalty, the kind of loyalty that puts individual desires ahead of institutional integrity. For a while, it worked. For a while, I thought that was the end of my story. I paused, letting my eyes move across the audience, seeing some of myself in every face. But here's what I learned. You can't replace competence with favoritism. You can't substitute relationship politics for professional excellence. And you can't build lasting authority on anything except earned respect and demonstrated leadership. The auditorium was silent, these future officers hanging on every word. I replaced them with legacy. Not revenge, not retaliation, not the kind of petty score settling that diminishes everyone involved. Legacy. The kind of leadership that outlasts personal conflicts, that survives changes in command, that builds something stronger than any individual ego. I looked down at my notes, but I didn't need them. This story was written in my bones now, carved into my understanding of what leadership really meant. The officer who betrayed me fought for love. I understand that. Love is powerful, it's compelling, it makes us want to protect and advance the people we care about. But I fought for honor. And in the end, honor outranked them both. Standing at that podium, Wearing the uniform I had earned through years of service, speaking to the next generation of military leaders, I felt the full weight of what had happened to me. Not as a victim, but as someone who had been tested and had emerged stronger. He gave my badge away for her, I concluded, my voice carrying the full emotional weight of that betrayal. But headquarters gave me the stars for every woman who was told she wasn't enough, for every service member who wondered if competence could overcome politics, for everyone who believed that doing the right thing would eventually matter more than knowing the right people. The applause that followed wasn't just for me. It was for every person who had ever been betrayed by someone they trusted, who had ever wondered if integrity was worth the cost, who had ever chosen the harder path because it was the right path. After the ceremony, as I walked across the base that had become truly mine, I thought about Admiral Grant. He had been reassigned to a staff position where his experience could be valuable, but his authority was limited. According to the reports I received, he was performing well, working to rebuild the reputation he had damaged, trying to become worthy again of the trust that had been placed in him. I hoped he would succeed. Not because I had forgiven him, forgiveness was a process, not a destination, but because the fleet needed leaders who had learned from their mistakes, who understood the cost of putting personal desires ahead of professional duty. More importantly, those young officers I had just addressed needed to see that redemption was possible, that a single failure didn't have to define an entire career, that the military could be a place where people could learn, grow, and become better versions of themselves. But they also needed to understand that redemption came with a price. The humility to admit failure, the courage to change, and the commitment to earn back what had been lost through patient demonstration of renewed character. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that happened, I realize that the real story isn't about revenge or justice or even betrayal. It's about what happens when the systems we trust fail us and how we choose to respond. Admiral Grant taught me something valuable, though not in the way he intended. He taught me that even good people can become corrupted when they start believing that their personal desires justify professional misconduct. He taught me that loyalty without boundaries becomes favoritism, that love without wisdom becomes destruction. But he also taught me something else, that true leadership isn't about avoiding failure, it's about how you handle failure when it comes. It's about whether you learn from your mistakes or repeat them, whether you take responsibility or make excuses, whether you use your experience to become better or just become bitter. The badge he gave away was just a symbol. The authority it represented couldn't be transferred by ceremony or personal preference. Real authority, the kind that actually matters, comes from the trust and respect of the people you serve. It comes from demonstrated competence, consistent integrity, and the courage to do what's right even when it costs you something. That's what headquarters recognized when they promoted me. Not just my technical skills or my service record, but my character under pressure. They saw someone who had been tested by betrayal and had responded with professionalism instead of bitterness, with grace instead of revenge. They saw someone who understood that real power isn't about crushing your enemies. It's about building something better than what existed before. When I wear my uniform now, when I see the respect in the eyes of my subordinates, when I make decisions that affect the lives and careers of the people under my command, I carry the weight of that lesson. Every choice I make is informed by the knowledge that leadership is a sacred trust, not a personal privilege. The people who serve under me deserve better than what I received from Admiral Grant. They deserve leaders who will put their welfare ahead of personal comfort, who will make decisions based on competence rather than favoritism, who will protect their careers rather than sacrifice them for romantic convenience. That's the legacy I'm building. Not the legacy of someone who was wronged and sought revenge, but the legacy of someone who was tested and chose honor. Someone who was betrayed and chose to become worthy of the trust that was violated. Someone who learned that the best response to corruption isn't to become corrupted yourself, but to become so transparently honest that corruption can't survive in your presence. He gave my badge away for her. But headquarters gave me the stars for everyone who believes that integrity matters more than influence, that competence matters more than connections, that honor matters more than convenience. And every day I wear this uniform, every decision I make, every officer I mentor, every standard I uphold, that's my answer to betrayal. Not revenge, but righteousness. Not bitterness, but better leadership. That's how you win when winning means becoming someone worthy of the trust placed in you. That's how you honor a uniform that someone else dishonored. That's how you serve something greater than yourself, even when the people around you serve only themselves. Real power isn't about who salutes first. It's about who earns respect when no one's watching, who maintains integrity when it's costly, who stands for something bigger than their own desires. And sometimes, just sometimes, the system works. Sometimes competence does overcome politics. Sometimes doing the right thing does matter more than knowing the right people. Sometimes honor does outrank them both.